If I had to define quite quickly, what it was that would be a defining characteristic of the wisest person in the world, what they would actually be like in practice, I would have to say someone who is willing to admit that they could be wrong all the time. You know, I'm not completely like that. I don't think anyone is completely like that. It's something that we can like aspire to or head towards. Because of my history here on YouTube, especially on this one particular channel, I've become associated with a certain combination of ideas. And there are some individuals who are using some of the things that I've said rather selectively, for want of a better word. As if to say, oh, he must think precisely the same way as I do, when on further and deeper, more objective analysis of the core values of the individual who's private messaging me or whatever, some stark differences can in fact be visible. The differences could be in terms of theological interpretation or not, a certain lack of ambivalence on their side of things, a certain desire to move away from admitting when they don't know something, or indeed to be able to state that maybe there are some things that we don't know despite the experiences that we actually have. It's hard, as I have said before, and sometimes frustrating to try and convey a message which I personally am of the opinion is the right one, when the tide of opinion on the internet appears to be going contrary to that. For those of you who've been paying careful attention to what I've been saying, you may have noticed that there has been times when I have attempted to move away from that. However, my disgust and utter contempt with positions which are too far to the left field and are based upon a more simplistic understanding of fates, karma, uh, bonds between people or lack thereof, or demons and angels and spirits and gods and goddesses, and the alleged superiority of one particular theological form over another has basically led me back onto the original track that I was on previously, namely attempting to explain the things that I am curious about in a manner which permits and allows a certain quantity of ambivalence, ambiguity, holding two different positions at once and being able to confess that maybe one could be more right than the other, but whichever one it is, I'm not sure. To be able to state that, despite the evidence, I would have to say that I have skepticism and skeptical values. When I have seen or when I have been in communication with an individual who goes contrary to my natural ambivalent agnostic attitude, I can feel concerned for their health of mind and body, but also I can feel that if I was to portray a more simplistic message, that maybe I would be doing more harm than good. And I don't want to do more harm than good. I want to try and do more good than harm. I know full well that the more popular attitudes and values on the subjects in which I have been known to speak about on this one particular channel over the years are rather controversial. I know that the subjects that I speak about have some kind of connection to nature and therefore have some form of objective reality, but not a complete objective reality, because the models of how these things operate in the consciousness of the average individual who, despite a great quantity of education in some cases, as well as a great quantity of wealth and success in others, does not seem to have permeated through to the intelligent and the irrational. In short, there are people of wealth and intelligence who are superstitious. There are people who are highly successful who have written much more than I could ever shake a stick at in my entire life, who still could be considered to have brains the size of peanuts, and are rather dangerous and pathetic. There are individuals who have accepted the dogma and doctrine of individuals who have written a wide variety of different forms of literature, or indeed people who watch certain forms of TV show, which maybe I have watched when I was a little younger, but also which these days seems to make me cringe inside and have a certain quantity of pity, and also mixed with contempt for certain demographics within the ideological spheres of life associated with the subject, which can very loosely be considered to be the paranormal or supernatural. In short, I know this rant seems to be going on, and maybe going into too much detail and depth for certain qualities of people, but maybe those individuals will end up not watching and will try and find a channel which is dedicated to something a little more simplistic. But, for want of a better word, and to try and simplify as if I could my position within this one particular video in two separate words, I'm back. Whether I could continue with a more vehement form of rant and eloquence upon this channel is another issue, because I do not want to come out as something which I am not, namely a hard skeptic of everything, and definitely not an atheist. I have not a single drop of atheist blood within my body, apart from that was passed on to me by my mother. But on the other hand, it has since been converted to a form of deist spiritualism. Every part of it. I am what I am. The rationale for this one particular video has come about as a result of a particular private message exchange with an individual who I was curious about and decided to continue my communications with him. He requested that I give him familiar spirits, for which he was willing to pay the princely sum of 45,000 US dollars. I thought this was very curious, and initially I, naturally for financial reasons, was considering going ahead with it. But I also wanted to make sure I wasn't going to do this individual any harm. This individual took a rather aggressive tone with me and a rather aggressive attitude, especially in terms of the wording that they used, and I realized with the passage of time that this individual was rather dogmatic. For instance, being able to state precisely what familiar spirits were, and that he would be able to see them, and that they would automatically be able to do as he tells them. Evidently, without knowing or understanding the concepts related to servitors, their creation, and the fact that the methodology of servitor creation is the same within each and every single culture throughout the entire world. Some of the alleged spirits are higher beings, some of the alleged spirits are lower beings, but even then, we still can't say all that much about them, apart from the fact that occasionally under some strange circumstances some strange things seem to occur, which seem to be somehow consciousness-based. And that is the cornerstone of essentially a lot of spiritualist activity, as well as, of course, things associated with the allegedly paranormal and supernatural. Some strange things seem to occur, that's all. But we don't know, and never will do, probably under any circumstances and for many centuries to come, whether these things do actually exist. The bizarre coincidences which occur when one is dealing with things of a spiritual nature seem to imply something, but they could equally imply something completely different, such as consciousness traveling over space and time, rather than necessarily a objectively created spiritual being. Therefore, as is always, we have questions, not answers. In the end, this inquirer I blocked, because I was getting somewhat disturbed by them. Which means, of course, that I turned down 45,000 US dollars. One would assume with an individual of his type, if he was that dogmatic, that I could have found a way of convincing him that the ritual had worked, one way or another, using my skill of speech or reasoning and eloquence. But my morality was too strong, and I refused to permit this to go on. That money would have been very useful. The deposit on a house, maybe. The land I've always wanted. To be able to progress towards self-sufficiency. And to fulfill the most important dream for myself. But allegorically speaking, is it worthwhile selling one's soul to fulfill one's dreams? Or is it better to try and use one's industry in a manner which is best suited to do the greatest good to the greatest number as a result of the quality of explanation that you are giving, as opposed to being fraudulent and to deceive purely for the purposes of financial gain? You see, when I'm doing my work, I tend to use language very carefully in order to avoid doing harm. And in this particular case, in the end, I did what was right. I do hope my ramble and rant has not been too difficult. Not too harsh, not too hard. And I do feel that, or I hope that, I aspire that this one particular video has explained more to you about what I am, really. Look after yourselves, good fortune, God bless, don't go crazy. And I look forward to ranting at you at some later date.